The howling blizzard tore through the Colorado Rockies like a hungry wolf, blinding Sarah Reynolds as she clutched her infant daughter against her chest, desperate to shield the child from winter's merciless fury. It was 1876, and the unforgiving wilderness of the American frontier had already taken everything from her. Now it seemed determined to claim what little she had left. "Hold on, Emily," Sarah whispered, her chapped lips brushing against the baby's forehead. "Just a little further." But even as the words left her mouth, she knew they were hollow. The snow had risen past her ankles, and the dimming light signaled night's approach, death's companion in these mountains. The stagecoach that had abandoned them was long gone, its driver unwilling to risk the treacherous mountain pass with a storm brewing. The other passengers, businessmen from back east, had convinced him that waiting for Sarah, who had stepped away to change her crying infant, would endanger them all. By the time she'd returned to the trail, there was nothing but fading wheel tracks being swallowed by fresh snow. Sarah's teeth chattered violently as she stumbled forward. Her thin cotton dress and worn shawl offered little protection against the biting cold. The baby had grown eerily quiet, and terror gripped Sarah's heart. She patted Emily's cheek gently, relieved when the child stirred and whimpered. "That's it, sweet girl. Stay with me," she encouraged, though her own strength was fading. Her husband Thomas had died of typhoid 3 months earlier in Denver, leaving her alone with their newborn daughter and little more than the clothes on their backs. She had been headed to her cousin's home in Silverton, her last hope for survival. The wind changed direction suddenly, parting the curtain of white long enough for Sarah to glimpse something in the distance, a flicker of orange against the gathering darkness. Fire. The sight sent a surge of desperate hope through her frozen limbs. "Help," she tried to call, but her voice emerged as little more than a rasp. Summoning her last reserves of strength, Sarah pushed forward toward the light, each step a battle against the deepening snow and her own exhaustion. The firelight grew stronger, revealing the silhouette of a small cabin nestled against the mountainside. Smoke curled from its chimney, dancing with the snowflakes. Just 100 more yards, she told herself. Just 100 more. Halfway there, her legs finally betrayed her. Sarah collapsed to her knees, still cradling Emily against her chest. The baby began to wail, the sound barely audible above the wind's roar. Tears froze on Sarah's cheeks as she tried and failed to stand again. "Please," she whispered to the indifferent storm, "please help us." As if in answer, a dark figure emerged from the cabin, lantern in hand. For a moment, Sarah thought she might be hallucinating a mercy of the cold before it claimed her, but then the figure was running toward her, boots kicking up plumes of snow. "Madam, hold on." A deep voice called out, cutting through the howling wind. The man reached her side and knelt down, his face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "Can you stand?" he asked, his voice urgent but gentle. Sarah tried to answer, but her lips had gone numb. She shook her head weakly, clutching Emily tighter. Without hesitation, the stranger set down his lantern and shrugged off his heavy wool coat, wrapping it around Sarah's shoulders. Then, with surprising tenderness for hands so weathered, he scooped up both mother and child in his arms. "I've got you," he assured her, his breath warm against her frozen skin. "Both of you." The journey to the cabin passed in a blur of swirling snow and growing warmth where Sarah was pressed against the stranger's chest. She registered the solid thump of his heartbeat, steady and strong, before darkness claimed her consciousness. When Sarah awoke, it was to the crackling of flames and the unfamiliar sensation of warmth enveloping her body. She was lying on a narrow cot near a stone fireplace, wrapped in several thick blankets. Panic seized her as she realized Emily was no longer in her arms. "Emily," she cried out, struggling to sit up despite her body's protests. "She's right here, madam, safe and sound." The deep voice drew Sarah's attention to a rocking chair on the other side of the fire. There sat her rescuer, gently cradling her daughter in his arms. He had removed his hat, revealing thick chestnut hair that fell to his shoulders. His face, illuminated by the dancing firelight, was all angles and plain strong jawline covered in stubble, straight nose, and eyes the color of the summer sky. Who are you?" Sarah managed, her voice hoarse. "Cole Winters, madam," he replied, rising carefully so as not to disturb the sleeping infant. Most folks just call me Winters. He crossed to her side and carefully transferred Emily back into her arms. Sarah clutched her daughter close, relief washing over her as she felt the child's warm breath against her neck. "Thank you, Mr. Winters. You saved our lives." Cole nodded once, a simple acknowledgement. Any man would have done the same. He moved to a pot hanging over the fire and stirred its contents. "Got some stew here. Nothing fancy, but it'll put some warmth back in you." As he spoke, Sarah took in her surroundings. The cabin was small but sturdy, with a single room serving as kitchen, bedroom, and living space combined. Everything was meticulously organized, tools hung on the wall, books stacked neatly on a small shelf, bedroll tucked away in the corner. This was the home of a man who lived alone and liked it that way. "I'm Sarah Reynolds," she offered as Cole handed her a steaming bowl. "And this is Emily." "Pleased to meet you both, though I wish it had been under better circumstances." Cole sat back in his chair, watching as Sarah took a tentative spoonful of the stew. "Stage left you behind?" Sarah nodded, shame coloring her cheeks. "I stepped away to change Emily. When I returned, they were gone." The driver said the pass would be too dangerous with the storm coming. Cole's expression darkened. "Man leaves a woman and baby to die, he ought to be strung up." He ran a hand through his hair, visibly restraining his anger. "Where were you headed, Silverton?" "My cousin Martha lives there with her husband." Sarah swallowed hard. "My husband died 3 months ago. Typhoid. Martha's the only family I have left." For a moment, only the crackling of the fire filled the silence between them. Then Cole nodded, as if coming to a decision. "Well, Mrs. Reynolds, you and the little one are welcome to stay until the storm passes. Once the trail clears, I can take you to Silverton myself." He gestured toward the cot. "You take the bed, I'm used to the floor." "I couldn't possibly. No argument, madam." "You need your strength, especially if you're caring for the little one." There was something in his tone that brooked no disagreement, yet lacked any hint of harshness. Sarah found herself nodding in acceptance, too exhausted to protest further. As she settled back against the pillow, Emily nestled securely in the crook of her arm. Sarah watched Cole move about the cabin with quiet efficiency. He added wood to the fire, hung his damp coat to dry, and laid out his bedroll at a respectful distance from her cot. "Mr. Winters," she said softly as he prepared to extinguish the lamp, "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Cole paused, his hand on the lamp's dial. In the flickering light, his expression softened almost imperceptibly. "No need for repayment, Mrs. Reynolds. Get some rest now. You're safe here." As darkness claimed the cabin, with only the firelight casting shadows on the walls, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced since Thomas's death security. Outside, the blizzard continued its assault, but here, wrapped in the warmth of a stranger's generosity, she and Emily would survive the night. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the cabin's single window. Sarah awoke to find Emily already being tended to by Cole, who was awkwardly but carefully changing the baby's cloth diaper on the table. "Good morning," he said, noticing her stirring. "Hope you don't mind. Little Miss here was making her displeasure known while you were sleeping." Sarah sat up, surprised by the tenderness in the rugged cowboy's actions. "You seem to know what you're doing." A shadow passed over Cole's features. "Had a sister with young ones once upon a time." He didn't elaborate further, and something in his expression told Sarah not to ask. After a simple breakfast of cornbread and coffee, Cole pulled on his coat and hat. "Need to check the animals. Storms died down, but there's 3 feet of snow out there. We won't be traveling anywhere for a few days at least." The thought of being stranded should have frightened Sarah, but instead she felt a curious sense of relief. "We'll be fine here," she said, and meant it. When Cole returned, his beard and coat frosted with snow, he brought armfuls of firewood and news that the trail to Silverton was completely blocked. "Might be a week, maybe more, before it's passable," he explained, stomping snow from his boots. "I'm sorry to impose on you for so long," Sarah said, bouncing Emily gently in her arms. Cole's gaze met hers, steady and unreadable. "No imposition, Mrs. Reynolds. Been a while since this cabin had any company besides myself." Over the next days, they settled into an unexpected rhythm of coexistence. Cole tended his small herd of horses, chopped wood, and hunted when weather permitted. Sarah kept the cabin, cooked with their limited supplies, and cared for Emily. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, sharing stories of their lives before circumstance had thrown them together. Sarah learned that Cole had been a cavalry scout during the war, then a rancher in Texas, before losing his land in a drought. He'd been drifting for 5 years, working as a cowhand, guide, and occasional bounty hunter, before settling in this remote cabin to raise horses. "Figured I'd had enough of people for a while," he admitted one evening, whittling a small wooden horse as they sat by the fire. "Out here, a man answers only to himself and Mother Nature." "And yet you took in 2 strangers without hesitation," Sarah observed quietly, Cole's hands stilled on the carving. "Some things a man just does because they need doing, Mrs. Reynolds." "Sarah," she corrected him softly. "After all this time sharing your home, I think you can call me Sarah." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Sarah, then." On the 4th night, as a fresh snowfall blanketed the world outside, Emily developed a fever. Sarah woke to her daughter's unusual fussiness, and panic gripped her heart when she felt the heat radiating from the baby's tiny body. "Cole," she called out, her voice trembling, "something's wrong with Emily." He was at her side in an instant, sleep forgotten. "What is it she's burning up?" Tears threatened as Sarah cradled her whimpering daughter. "I don't know what to do. Thomas always handled the medicines, and let me see her," Cole said, his voice calm and steady. He placed a weathered hand gently on Emily's forehead. "She's hot, all right. But don't worry, I've got something that might help." He moved to a trunk in the corner, rummaging until he extracted a small bottle. "Willow bark extract. My mother swore by it for fevers." He measured a tiny amount into a spoon. "Just a little now, it's bitter, but it helps." Together, they coaxed the medicine into Emily. Then Cole dampened a cloth with cool water for Sarah to place on the baby's forehead. Through the long night, they took turns walking the floor with the feverish child, speaking in hushed tones and offering what comfort they could. As dawn approached, Emily's fever finally broke. She fell into a peaceful sleep against Cole's chest as he sat in the rocking chair, his large hand protectively covering her back. Sarah, exhausted from the night's vigil, watched them from her seat by the fire. "You're good with her," she observed quietly. Cole looked down at the sleeping infant, something unreadable passing across his face. "Had practice, like I said." "Your sister's children," he nodded, the motion almost imperceptible. "My sister Caroline and her husband were killed in an Apache raid when I was riding with the cavalry. Their boy and girl survived." His voice grew distant. "Took them east to my aunt in Boston after that. They'd be grown now. Haven't seen them in 15 years. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered, understanding now the shadows that sometimes darkened his eyes. "It was another life," Cole said simply. But the gentle way he held Emily spoke volumes about the man beneath the hardened exterior. When the baby stirred, Cole transferred her carefully back to Sarah's arms. Their hands touched in the exchange, and for a moment, neither moved away. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the fire burning beside them. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely audible. "For what?" he asked, his blue eyes searching hers. "For being here, for knowing what to do, for caring." Something shifted in Cole's expression then, a softening around the eyes, a tension in his jaw. He reached out, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind Sarah's ear. "Get some rest," he said gruffly, withdrawing his hand. "Both of you need it." As he turned away, Sarah caught a glimpse of emotion on his face that sent her heart racing. It was gone in an instant, but she was certain of what she'd seen longing, layered with a resolve to keep his distance. The blizzard's aftermath kept them confined to the cabin for 3 more days. With each passing hour, Sarah became increasingly aware of Cole's presence, the sound of his voice, as he hummed old trail songs while working, the strength in his hands as he repaired tack or carved small toys for Emily, the way his eyes lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking. It had been only 7 days since he'd found them in the snow, yet Sarah felt as though she'd known Cole Winters all her life. There was an ease between them that she'd never experienced with anyone, not even Thomas, whose courtship had been proper and prescribed by her parents' expectations. On the 8th day, The sun emerged brilliant and strong, beginning the slow process of melting the snow that had isolated them from the world. Cole spent the morning clearing a path to the barn and checking the trail that led down the mountain. Another few days of this sunshine, and we should be able to make it to Silverton, he announced upon his return, stamping snow from his boots at the door. Sarah looked up from where she sat mending one of his shirts, Emily asleep in a makeshift cradle nearby. "Oh," she said, unable to mask the disappointment in her voice. "That's good news." Cole hung his coat by the door, his movements deliberate. "Your cousin will be worried about you." "Yes, of course." Sarah returned to her stitching, though her hands had suddenly grown clumsy. A silence fell between them, broken only by the crackle of the fire and Emily's soft breathing. Finally, Cole crossed the room and sat on the bench across from Sarah. "Sarah," he began, then stopped, as if the words he needed wouldn't come. She looked up, meeting his gaze. "Yes." He reached across the table, his calloused fingers gently covering her hand. "I want you to know that. These days with you and Emily, they've been—" He trailed off, frustration evident in the furrow of his brow. "I know," Sarah whispered, turning her hand to clasp his. "For me too." The admission hung between them, fragile as a snowflake. Cole's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, each movement sending shivers up her arm that had nothing to do with cold. "I've been alone a long time," he said finally. "Got used to it, thought it was better that way. And now?" Sarah asked, hardly daring to breathe. Cole's eyes, blue as the winter sky, held hers. "Now I'm not so sure." The moment stretched between them, taut with possibility. Then Emily stirred in her cradle, breaking the spell. Sarah reluctantly withdrew her hand and went to tend to her daughter. As she lifted Emily, Cole rose and moved to the window, staring out at the brightening day. His broad shoulders were tense, his posture rigid. Sarah watched him, cradling Emily against her shoulder, understanding that whatever had just passed between them had left him conflicted. "Cole," she said softly, "is something wrong?" He didn't turn. "Your cousin's expecting you. You'll have a proper home there, people to help with the baby." His voice was measured, controlled. "It's what's best for you both." The words stung, though Sarah recognized the truth in them. "Yes," she agreed quietly, "but that doesn't make leaving any easier." At that, Cole finally turned to face her. "I'm a drifter, Sarah, have been most of my life. This cabin, these mountains, they're just a stopping place. I can't offer you or Emily the kind of stability you deserve." Sarah stood straighter, Emily secure in her arms. "I didn't ask you to offer us anything, didn't you?" His voice was gentle, without accusation. "Not with words, maybe, but I've seen how you look at me, and God help me, I've looked at you the same way." Heat flooded Sarah's cheeks, but she didn't deny it. "Is that so terrible? It is if I can't be what you need." Cole ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Sarah had come to recognize as a sign of his inner turmoil. "Your husband's only been gone a few months. You're vulnerable, alone with a child in a harsh land. I won't take advantage of that." "You think that's what this is?" Sarah asked, indignation rising. "That I'm so desperate I would attach myself to the first man who showed kindness." Cole shook his head. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" She placed Emily back in her cradle and crossed to stand before him, close enough to see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes. "I meant that you deserve better than a worn-out cowboy with nothing to his name but a few horses and too many ghosts." The rawness in his voice stopped her protest. "You deserve a man who can give you and Emily a future, not just shelter from a storm." Sarah reached up, her hand hovering near his cheek before she found the courage to touch him. His skin was warm beneath her fingertips, the stubble rough against her palm. "You did more than shelter us from a storm, Cole Winters," she said softly. "You reminded me that there's still goodness in this world, still reasons to hope." She dropped her hand, suddenly self-conscious. "But you're right, we'll be leaving soon, and that's as it should be." Before Cole could respond, a sharp knock at the door startled them both. They sprang apart like guilty children, Cole's hand instinctively moving to the rifle propped by the door. "Winters, you in there, it's Sheriff Taylor." Cole exchanged a puzzled glance with Sarah before calling out, "Coming, Sheriff." He opened the door to reveal a middle-aged man on horseback, badge glinting on his chest. "Afternoon, Winters," the sheriff said, tipping his hat. "Been trying to check on folks after that storm." Saw your smoke and thought I'd make sure you were all right. His eyes moved past Cole to where Sarah stood with Emily. Didn't know you had company. This is Mrs. Reynolds and her daughter, Cole explained. Found them caught in the blizzard last week. Stagecoach left them behind. The sheriff's expression darkened. Damn Barlow, told him those shortcuts would get someone killed someday. He nodded respectfully to Sarah. Madam, glad to see you safe. Where were you headed when that scoundrel abandoned you, Silverton? Sarah replied. My cousin Martha lives there with her husband, John Pratt. Recognition flashed across the sheriff's face. The Pratts, John Pratt's the blacksmith there. His expression grew solemn. Madam, I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news. Silverton got hit hard by the blizzard. There was an avalanche that took out several buildings on the north side of town. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Martha and John, are they? The Pratts survived, madam, the sheriff assured her quickly, but their home was destroyed. Last I heard, they were heading east to stay with family in Kansas City until spring. The news hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her only plan, her last hope, had vanished as surely as if the avalanche had buried it beneath tons of snow. I see, she managed, her voice faint. Thank you for telling me. Cole was at her side in an instant, his hand steady on her elbow. You all right? Sarah nodded mechanically, though she felt anything but all right. I'll need to. I'm not sure what I'll need to do. The sheriff cleared his throat awkwardly. Town's organizing relief for those affected. You could come back with me to Durango, see if they can help you get word to your folks. Before Sarah could answer, Cole spoke up. She and the baby will stay here until arrangements can be made. His tone left no room for argument. Trail's still dangerous for a woman and infant. The sheriff nodded, seeming relieved. That's mighty decent of you, Winters. I'll let folks know they're safe with you. He tipped his hat again. Madam, I'm truly sorry about your situation. If there's anything the town can do, just send word with Winters here. After the sheriff departed, silence settled over the cabin like fresh snow. Sarah sank onto the bench, her mind racing. Without Martha and John, she had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. The meager funds sewn into the hem of her dress wouldn't last a month in a town like Durango. Sarah, Cole's voice penetrated her thoughts. What are you thinking? She looked up at him, struggling to keep her composure. I'm thinking that fate has a cruel sense of humor. A bitter laugh escaped her. I survived typhoid, widowhood, a blizzard, only to find myself exactly where I started alone with no prospects. You're not alone, Cole said quietly. No, Sarah challenged, rising to face him. The sheriff just rode away assuming you'd take responsibility for us, and you didn't correct him. But only hours ago, you were explaining all the reasons why we couldn't stay. Cole had the grace to look chagrined. That was before I knew you had nowhere else to go. So now it's obligation keeping me here. Pity. The words tasted sour in her mouth. Damn it, woman, that's not what I meant and you know it. Cole's patience finally frayed. I'm trying to do the right thing here. And what is the right thing, Cole? Sarah demanded, emotion making her bold. To keep us at arm's length while you play the noble protector. To pretend there's nothing between us when we both know there is. Her words hung in the air between them, unavoidable and raw. Cole stared at her, his expression a storm of conflicting emotions. For a moment, Sarah thought he might turn away, retreat behind the walls he'd built around himself. Instead, he crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and took her face in his hands. The right thing, he said, his voice low and intense, would be to let you go. To find you a good home in town with decent folks who can give you and Emily the life you deserve. His thumbs traced the curve of her cheekbones. But God help me, Sarah, I don't want to do the right thing. I want to be selfish. I want to keep you here with me. And then his mouth was on hers, his kiss desperate and tender all at once. Sarah's arms wound around his neck, drawing him closer as years of loneliness and weeks of unspoken longing poured out between them. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. I've wanted to do that since the moment you opened your eyes in my cabin, Cole confessed. His voice rough, Sarah smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in months despite the uncertainty of her situation. What took you so long, Cowboy? His answering laugh was sudden and bright, transforming his usually solemn face. Stubborn pride, I reckon. He grew serious again, though his arms remained around her waist. "Sarah, I meant what I said. I don't have much to offer you." "You offered us your blanket in a blizzard," she reminded him softly. "Your home when we had none, your protection when we were vulnerable." She reached up to touch his face again. "Some would say that's offering everything." Cole turned his head to press a kiss into her palm. "It's not the kind of life you're used to." "My old life is gone, Cole. Thomas is gone. My plans for Silverton are gone." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "All I have is now, Emily and me and you, if you'll have us." The smile that spread across Cole's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "I'll have you, Sarah Reynolds, for as long as you'll stay." This time when he kissed her, it was slow and deep, a promise being sealed between them. It was Emily's hungry cry that finally separated them, both laughing breathlessly. "Seems someone has an opinion on these developments," Cole observed as Sarah went to retrieve the baby. "She approves," Sarah assured him, lifting Emily into her arms. "She's just hungry." Cole watched them for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "We should marry," he said suddenly. "Make it proper." Sarah's heart skipped, but she raised an eyebrow at his blunt proposal. "Most women prefer to be courted before receiving marriage proposals, Mr. Winters." He had the grace to look sheepish. "Never been one for pretty words, Sarah, but I know what I want." He moved to stand before her, gently placing a hand on Emily's head. "I want you both in my life, permanently." Sarah pretended to consider, though her heart was already singing its answer. "I suppose a wedding would be the sensible thing, for propriety's sake." "For propriety," Cole agreed solemnly, though his eyes danced with barely suppressed joy. "Nothing at all to do with how much I've grown to love you this past week." The word hung between them, new and shining. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "Love?" Cole nodded, suddenly serious. "Love. Didn't think I'd ever feel it again, but there it is." He touched her cheek gently. "You don't have to say it back. It's too soon, I know. I love you too," Sarah interrupted, the words tumbling out. "It's mad and it's sudden, but it's true." The brilliance of Cole's smile could have melted all the snow in Colorado. He wrapped his arms around both Sarah and Emily, holding them close as if afraid they might vanish. "When the trail clears, we'll ride to Durango," he murmured against her hair. "Find the preacher and make it official." Sarah nodded against his chest, contentment flowing through her. Outside, the sun continued to shine on the snow-covered peaks, promising a thaw and a new path forward. But here, wrapped in the arms of a man who had given her shelter in the storm, Sarah had already found her way home. True to his word, once the trail cleared enough for safe passage, Cole hitched his sturdy wagon and carefully loaded it with provisions for the journey to Durango. Sarah watched him work, Emily bundled against her chest, marveling at how quickly life could change. 2 weeks ago, she had been desperate and alone, facing death in a blizzard. Now she was preparing to marry a man who had captured her heart with his quiet strength and unexpected tenderness. "You sure about this?" Cole asked as he helped her into the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist. "Marrying a rough cowboy you barely know," Sarah smiled, leaning into his touch. "I know enough." She reached up to touch his face. "I know you're honorable and kind. I know you're patient with Emily and gentle with your horses. I know your coffee is terrible, but your stew is delicious." This earned her a chuckle. "And I know that when you look at me, I feel like I've finally found where I belong." Cole's eyes darkened with emotion. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers. "You belong with me," he said simply, "both of you." The journey to Durango took most of a day, with Cole driving carefully to avoid jostling Emily too much. They arrived as afternoon shadows lengthened across the bustling mining town. Sarah took in the wooden buildings lining the muddy Main Street, the saloons and mercantiles and boarding houses that comprised frontier civilization. Cole guided the wagon to a modest building with a wooden cross mounted above its door. "Reverend Simmons is a good man," he told Sarah. "Known him for years." The Reverend, a kindly older man with wire-rimmed spectacles and a generous smile, welcomed them warmly. "Cole Winters, haven't seen you in town for months." His eyes twinkled as they fell on Sarah and Emily. "And now I see why." "Reverend, this is Sarah Reynolds and her daughter Emily," Cole introduced them formally. "We're hoping you might marry us if you're not too busy." The Reverend's eyebrows rose slightly, but his smile didn't waver. Marriage is serious business, Cole. How long have you two known each other? Not long enough by normal standards, Cole admitted. But we're sure, Reverend. Reverend Simmons studied them both, his eyes wise and assessing. Sarah, my dear, is this what you want? No one's pressuring you, it's what I want, Sarah confirmed, meeting his gaze steadily. Cole saved our lives during the blizzard, but that's not why I'm marrying him. I'm marrying him because he's a good man who loves us and because I love him. The simplicity and certainty of her words seemed to satisfy the Reverend. Very well, let's not waste daylight then. He gestured toward the church. Come inside and we'll make it official. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, with only the Reverend's wife as witness. Sarah wore her best dress, the only one she had besides the one she'd arrived in, freshly washed and pressed. Cole had shaved and donned a clean shirt, his usually wild hair tamed and tied back with a leather cord. When they exchanged vows, Cole's voice was steady and sure, his eyes never leaving Sarah's. As he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, purchased that morning from the town jeweler, with money he'd been saving for a new stallion, Sarah felt tears of joy spill down her cheeks. I now pronounce you husband and wife, Reverend Simmons declared. Cole, you may kiss your bride. Cole's kiss was tender and reverent, a promise sealed before God and witnesses. When they parted, both were smiling, their futures now inexorably entwined. After the ceremony, Cole surprised Sarah by leading her not back to the wagon, but toward the town's finest hotel. Thought we deserved one night of luxury before heading back to the cabin, he explained, suddenly shy. It's not much, but Sarah silenced him with a kiss. It's perfect. The hotel room was indeed luxurious by frontier standards, a real feather bed, a washstand with actual hot water brought up by a porter, and a crib borrowed from the proprietor's daughter for Emily. After weeks in Cole's rustic cabin, it seemed positively opulent. They shared a private dinner in their room, stealing kisses between bites and making plans for their future together. Cole spoke of expanding his horse breeding operation, of adding rooms to the cabin, of teaching Emily to ride as soon as she was old enough. I never thought I'd have this again, he confessed as they sat before the small fireplace, Sarah nestled against his chest with Emily sleeping peacefully in the crib nearby. A family, a reason to build something lasting. Sarah turned in his arms to face him. Neither did I. After Thomas died, I thought that part of my life was over. She traced the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. You gave me hope again, Cole Winters. And you gave me a home, Sarah Winters, he replied, savoring the sound of her new name. That night, as Emily slept soundly in her borrowed crib, husband and wife discovered each other fully for the first time. Cole's hands, so capable with horses and tools, proved equally adept at drawing sighs of pleasure from Sarah's body. And Sarah, who had known only the perfunctory lovemaking of her first marriage, found herself awakening to passions she'd never imagined possible. After, as they lay tangled in the sheets, Cole's arms wrapped protectively around her, Sarah marveled at the strange path that had led her here. The tragedy of Thomas's death, the desperation of her journey, the abandonment in the blizzard all had led to this moment of perfect contentment in the arms of a man who loved her and her daughter with fierce devotion. What are you thinking? Cole murmured against her hair. That sometimes blessings come disguised as disasters, she replied, snuggling closer. If that stagecoach hadn't left us behind, I never would have found you. Cole's arms tightened around her. I thank God every day for bringing you to me, even if his methods were a bit extreme. Sarah laughed softly, her heart full. Outside, snow began to fall again, but this time there was no fear in her heart, only gratitude for the warmth and love she had found in the arms of her cowboy. Spring came to the Colorado mountains in a riot of wildflowers and rushing streams, the land awakening from its long winter sleep. The cabin that had once been Cole's solitary refuge had transformed over the months, much like the man himself. A second room had been added, a proper bedroom for the growing family. The main room now boasted curtains on the windows and a braided rug on the floor. Outside, a small garden was taking shape under Sarah's careful attention, promising fresh vegetables for the summer months. Cole's horse business was thriving. His reputation for well-trained, sturdy mountain horses had spread, bringing buyers from as far as Denver. With the additional income, he had hired 2 hands to help with the expanding herd, young brothers named Michael and James, who lived in a small bunkhouse near the corral. But the greatest transformation was in Cole himself. The solitary, guarded man who had rescued Sarah and Emily from the blizzard had given way to a husband and father whose smile came easily, and whose laughter filled the cabin that had once known only silence. On a particularly fine May morning, Sarah stood in the doorway of their home, watching as Cole taught 8-month-old Emily to pet the nose of a gentle mare. The baby's delighted giggles carried on the spring breeze, matched by Cole's deeper laughter when tiny fingers grabbed his beard instead of the horse's muzzle. "Careful there, little lady," he cautioned, gently disentangling her hand. "That's attached." Sarah's heart swelled with love for them both. Emily had taken her first tentative steps just days earlier, toddling from Sarah's arms straight to Cole, who had scooped her up with such pride that tears had shone in his eyes. "She's going to be a horsewoman like her father," Sarah called, moving to join them at the corral. Cole looked up, his face lighting with the smile he reserved only for her. "And stubborn like her mother," he added, leaning down to kiss Sarah when she reached his side. "I prefer to call it determined," Sarah corrected primly, though her eyes danced with amusement. Cole laughed, shifting Emily to his hip so he could wrap his free arm around Sarah's waist. "Determined, then. God help me when she's older and I have 2 determined Reynolds women to contend with." "Winter's women," Sarah reminded him, leaning into his embrace. "We're Winter's women now." The pride that flashed across Cole's face made her heart skip. 6 months of marriage had only deepened their connection, each day revealing new facets of the man she had come to love with her whole heart. "Mrs. Winters," he murmured against her ear, "have I told you today how much I love you?" Sarah pretended to consider. "Not since breakfast, I believe." A terrible oversight. Cole's eyes crinkled at the corners. "I love you, Sarah Winters, more than I ever thought possible." "And I love you," she replied, stretching up to kiss him again, Emily giggling between them. Later that evening, after Emily had been tucked into her crib, Sarah and Cole sat on the porch, watching as twilight painted the mountains in shades of purple and gold. Cole's arm was around her shoulders, her head resting comfortably against him as they enjoyed the peaceful end to another day. "I got a letter from my niece today," Cole said suddenly. "Caroline's daughter, Elizabeth, she's 18 now, finished with her schooling." Sarah sat up, surprised. In all their months together, Cole had rarely spoken of his sister's children, the painful memories still tender even after 15 years. "What did she say?" "She wants to come west, says Boston doesn't suit her." A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Seems she takes after her uncle more than her aunt would like." "Will you invite her to visit?" Sarah asked, knowing how much it would mean to Cole to reconnect with this piece of his past. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Thought I might. If you wouldn't mind another female around the place." "Mind, Cole, she's family." Sarah took his hand, squeezing it gently. "Of course she should come." Cole's answering smile was tender. "You're something special, Sarah Winters." Most wives wouldn't be so eager to welcome a headstrong young woman into their home. "Most wives haven't been alone in the world, desperate for family," Sarah replied softly. "I know what it's like to need connection." Cole pulled her close again, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You'll never be alone again, Sarah, not as long as I'm breathing." The promise warmed her more than the spring evening. "Neither will you," she assured him. "You're stuck with us now, Cowboy." They sat in companionable silence as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and Joy's horses to train, a garden to tend, a child to raise, perhaps a niece to welcome. But tonight, in this moment of perfect contentment, Sarah Reynolds Winters knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home not in a place, but in the arms of the man who had once wrapped her and her daughter in his blanket beside a fire, saving them from more than just the cold. "Penny for your thoughts," Cole murmured, his breath warm against her hair. Sarah smiled, nestling closer. "I was just thinking about that night in the blizzard, how close we came to never finding each other." Cole's arms tightened around her. "Some things are meant to be, Sarah." Some people are destined to find each other, no matter what stands in their way. Even blizzards and stagecoach drivers with poor judgment, she teased. Especially those, Cole affirmed with a chuckle. The universe had to work pretty hard to bring a refined lady like you to a rough cowboy like me. Sarah laughed softly. Not so refined anymore. These days I'm more comfortable mucking out stalls than attending tea parties. And yet you still manage to look like the finest lady in Colorado territory when you do it. Cole's voice had dropped to that husky tone that never failed to send shivers down Sarah's spine. She turned in his arms, meeting his darkened gaze. "Take me to bed, Mr. Winters." Cole needed no further invitation. In one fluid motion, he stood and swept her into his arms, carrying her through the doorway and toward their bedroom with purposeful strides. As the door closed behind them, Sarah sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the storm that had brought her to this man, this love, this life that exceeded her wildest dreams. Outside, the stars continued their ancient dance over the Colorado mountains, witnessing the love story that had begun in desperate circumstances and blossomed into something beautiful and enduring, a testament to the resilience of the human heart and the transformative power of love on the American frontier. 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. The small cabin had grown into a proper ranch house with 4 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, and a covered porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Cole's horse breeding business had become one of the most respected in Colorado territory, with buyers coming from as far as California to purchase his specially bred mountain horses. Sarah, now 28, stood on that porch watching her family with a heart full of contentment. 6-year-old Emily, her dark curls flying behind her, raced across the yard on her pony, a birthday gift from Cole the previous year. Despite Sarah's initial concerns, Emily had inherited her stepfather's natural affinity for horses and rode with a confidence that belied her young age. "Not so fast, young lady," Cole called from where he was mending a fence. "Remember what I told you about corners?" "Yes, Papa," Emily called back, obediently slowing her pony as she rounded the corral. "Papa." The word still brought tears to Sarah's eyes sometimes. Emily had no memories of Thomas Cole, was the only father she had ever known, and the bond between them was unbreakable. He had formally adopted her on her 3rd birthday, though in his heart, she had been his daughter from the moment he'd carried her and Sarah through the blizzard. Sarah's gaze shifted to where 3-year-old Caleb played in the dirt with his wooden horses, carefully arranged in formation just like his father's herd. With his father's chestnut hair and his mother's green eyes, Caleb was a perfect blend of them, both stubborn, adventurous, and fiercely loving. And then there was Abigail, just 8 months old, contentedly cooing in the cradle beside Sarah as she shelled peas for dinner. The baby had been a surprise blessing, arriving after Sarah had suffered 2 miscarriages that had nearly broken her spirit. But Cole had never lost faith, holding her through the darkest nights and promising that their family, whatever shape it took, was perfect. Elizabeth, Cole's niece, who had indeed come west 5 years ago, emerged from the house carrying a pitcher of lemonade. At 23, she had grown from the somewhat awkward Boston girl into a confident young woman who managed the ranch's accounts with impressive efficiency. "Thought you might be thirsty," she said, pouring Sarah a glass. "It's getting warm out here." "Thank you, Lizzie." Sarah accepted the drink gratefully. "Have the Hendersons arrived yet?" Elizabeth shook her head, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "Not yet, but Michael rode out to meet them at the crossroads." The eldest Henderson son had been courting Elizabeth for nearly a year now, his steady nature a perfect complement to her more impulsive one. "He's a good man," Sarah observed, hiding her smile at Elizabeth's blush. "Cole thinks highly of him." Uncle Cole would think highly of any man who could keep up with him on Roundup and still have energy to help with the hay, Elizabeth replied with a laugh, but her expression softened. "But yes, he is a good man, patient." "The best kind," Sarah agreed, her eyes finding Cole again as he straightened from his work, stretching his back before turning to help Caleb, who had wandered over with a solemn request to fix horses with his father. The years had been kind to Cole Winters. At 41, He was still as strong and vital as the day she'd met him, though silver now threaded through the hair at his temples, and the lines around his eyes had deepened from years of squinting into mountain sunlight. If anything, he had grown more handsome with age, more comfortable in his skin, more open with his heart. As if sensing her gaze, Cole looked up, catching her eye across the yard. The smile that spread across his face, intimate, knowing, full of promise, still had the power to make her breath catch after all these years. "Mr. Winters seems to be admiring the view," Elizabeth teased, following Sarah's gaze. Sarah laughed softly. "The feeling is entirely mutual." Elizabeth gathered the empty glasses with a knowing smile. "I'll take Abigail inside for her nap and keep an eye on Caleb. Emily can help me with the bread." The meaning was clear. She was giving Sarah and Cole a rare moment alone. "Thank you, Lizzie," Sarah said gratefully, squeezing her niece's hand. After Elizabeth had shepherded the children inside, Cole abandoned his fence mending and crossed the yard to the porch, taking the steps 2 at a time. Without a word, he pulled Sarah into his arms, his kiss both familiar and thrilling. "What was that for?" Sarah asked when they finally parted, her hands resting on his chest. "Do I need a reason to kiss my beautiful wife?" Cole countered, his blue eyes dancing with mischief and desire. "Certainly not," Sarah replied, stretching up for another brief kiss. "But I know that look, Cole Winters. You're up to something." Cole chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her palms. "Can't hide anything from you, can I?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Winters." Sarah's eyes widened. Their wedding anniversary wasn't for another month, and Cole had never been one to mix up dates. "It's not our anniversary yet," she reminded him gently. "Not that anniversary," Cole said, his expression growing more serious. "It's been exactly 6 years today since I found you and Emily in that blizzard. 6 years since you changed my life forever." Tears pricked Sarah's eyes at the realization that he had remembered such a date. "Cole, open it," he urged, pressing the pouch into her hand. Inside, Sarah found a delicate gold locket. When she opened it, she gasped softly. On one side was a tiny portrait of Emily as she was now, and on the other, a miniature of Caleb and baby Abigail together. "It's beautiful," she whispered, overcome with emotion. Cole's fingers brushed a tear from her cheek. "I wanted you to have something to remind you of how far we've come, from that night in the storm to this life we've built together." He took the locket and gently fastened it around her neck. "Every day I thank God for bringing you to me, Sarah." Sarah placed her hand over the locket, feeling it warm against her skin. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if that stagecoach hadn't left us behind," she admitted. "Where I would be now." Cole's arms encircled her waist, drawing her close. "I'd have found you somehow," he said with such certainty that Sarah couldn't help but believe him. "Some people are meant to be together, remember? The universe just gave us a little push." "A rather cold and dangerous push," Sarah reminded him with a soft laugh. "Worth every frostbitten toe," Cole assured her, dropping a kiss on the top of her head. "I'd walk through 100 blizzards to find you, Sarah Winters." As the afternoon sun bathed the ranch in golden light, Sarah leaned into her husband's embrace, savoring the solid strength of him, the security and love he represented. From the most desperate moment of her life had come its greatest blessing: a family, a home, a love story that grew richer with each passing day. "I love you, Cole," she said simply, the words carrying the weight of 6 years of shared joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges. "And I love you," he replied, his voice low and fervent, "until the stars fall from the sky." In the distance, the snow-capped peaks of the Colorado Rockies stood sentinel over the valley, unchanging and eternal. But here, in this moment, in the arms of the man who had once wrapped her and her daughter in his blanket beside a fire, Sarah knew that the greatest constants in life were not mountains or stars, but the enduring power of love and the family bonds forged in even the coldest of storms. As Cole lowered his head to kiss her again, Sarah closed her eyes and gave thanks for blizzards and abandoned stagecoaches, for cowboys with kind hearts, and for second chances at happiness on the wild American frontier. Their story, which had begun in desperation and near tragedy, would continue to unfold in love and joy for all the years to come, a testament to the truth that sometimes life's harshest storms lead to the warmest of shelters.